Welcome to Newsday. Reporting live from Singapore, I'm Karishma Viswani. The headlines. We're with Ukrainian forces on the front line, fighting to defend the country's second largest city, Kharkiv, from Russia's relentless assault.
And if these tactics are unfamiliar to you, then you haven't been paying attention, because this is the Russian attack playbook, perfected in over 10 years of war in Syria.
On the front line with the Ukrainian army as they brave the no-man's land towards Russian forces, their spirits stronger than ever.
We fight in our land and we protect our families, so it doesn't matter how they fight. We fight like lions and they won't win.
Wounded Ukrainian civilians are kept in the hallways of a hospital in Kharkiv, away from the windows to avoid further injury.
These stupid Russian shrapnel pieces I will carry all my life, but as long as my heart still beats, I will still live and love.
More than 2 million people are said to have fled the capital, Kyiv, but others have arrived after escaping from the Russian soldiers moving ever closer to the city. Exodus from Sumy. As humanitarian corridors are set up to escape the fighting, we meet some of the tens of thousands who've now fled. And Roman Abramovich, the Russian owner of Chelsea Football Club, is among 7 more oligarchs sanctioned by the British government. The sale of the club is now on hold.
Live from our studio in Singapore. This is BBC News. It's Newsday.
Hello and welcome to the programme. We begin our coverage with an exclusive report from the front line of the battle for Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv. It's endured nightly Russian air attacks and suffered dozens of civilian deaths and hundreds of injuries. Most of the city's 1.5 million residents have fled. The Ukrainian forces fought back a Russian armoured column in the early days of the invasion and have been fighting since to stop a further Russian advance. Quentin Sommerville and camera journalist Darren Conway are the first journalists to be embedded with the Ukrainian army as they fight the Russian advance. I should warn you, their report contains graphic images from the front line that some viewers will find disturbing.
Head to the very eastern edge of Ukraine and a ghostly vision of the country's fate unfolds before you. The city of Kharkiv is being purged of life. In near total blackout, the police in the country's second largest city take us on patrol. The Russians aren't far. Shelling happens every night. This close to the Russian border, there's another threat here. Saboteurs. No one escapes scrutiny. Alina, 76 years old, is lost and confused. In an instant, everybody's life here has been upended. But this young nation has surprised Russia and the world with its resolve. We weave our way past the fallen into no man's land with the Ukrainian army. Here is 21-year-old Yevgen Gromadsky. Where are the Russians?
Русські солдати, русські військові стоять плюс-мінус.
Over the sound of shelling, he tells me, the Russian soldiers are standing about 900 meters away from here. You can hear right now that they're firing on our positions, and we're firing back.
Поруч з даним місцем.
It's a grenade launcher, British.
But it's more than just a grenade launcher, it's a guided missile. Is it good against tanks?
It's the best we have right now.
How are the Russians fighting?
They're fighting like soldiers of 1941. They attacking just like in front. Now they don't do any maneuvers, so yeah, they have a lot of people, a lot of tanks, a lot of their vehicles and techniques, but we fight in our land and we protect our families. So it doesn't matter how they fight. We fight like lions and they won't win.
This city of 1 million plus people has emptied out. This civilian, so close to Ukrainian lines, just didn't make it. We've actually come beyond the Ukrainian front line, and we know that because look at all the destruction around here, and this whole area is littered with dead Russian bodies. These men, in fact, and there are 2 more over there, there are 2 more over there, are Chechen. They have IDs on them, their weapons have been removed. The Ukrainians keep telling us they're really comfortable with this type of fight because this is their territory, they're defending their city, their families. But the challenge from them is what comes from the sky. They want more aircraft and they want more air defences. And that might be where this battle, this war, is won and lost. In a war with Russia, the front line is everywhere. This is what people have been fleeing in Kharkiv. Endless bombardment for the past 2 weeks.
Our administration would like to inform you that a fire has started in the building. Of that reason, please go to the ground floor and from there leave the building.
This is what Russia does to cities. It bombards them, it besieges them, it surrounds them. It terrorizes entire populations. And if these tactics are unfamiliar to you, then you haven't been paying attention, because this is the Russian attack playbook, perfected in over 10 years of war in Syria. We know that Russia bombs hospitals. So here at the city's hospital number 4, they keep the wounded in hallways, away from the windows. Miss Valentina has been hit by shrapnel. I have a poem for you, she says.
These stupid Russian shrapnel pieces I will carry all my life, but as long as my heart still beats, I will still live and love.
And so too will 8-year-old Dmitry, now that this has been removed from his skull. This is the war that Russia has fought before and is fighting again. We don't know the rest of Ukraine's fate, but Kharkiv has already shown what's coming next.
Defenders, we will ride together. We will win this war, and all our heroic people will gather to rebuild our beloved Ukraine.
Quentin, Sommerville, BBC News, Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine.
While Russian forces are continuing their advance towards the capital, Kyiv. More than half the population has fled since the invasion began. The mayor of the city has described it as a fortress. Humanitarian organizations have warned that many people have run out of food and are still living without water or gas. Russian forces are said to have rolled their armoured vehicles up to the northeastern edge of the city today. My colleague Jeremy Bowen sent this report from Kyiv.
When your world is turned upside down, there's separation, loss, confusion, and relief at getting out alive. Hundreds more have been evacuated from villages in the firing line outside Kyiv in the last few days, taking bad memories into new, uncertain lives.
Did you see any Russians? Yes. What were the Russians like? Did they speak to you?
They were mute. They were mute. No comments, no words, nothing. They were mute. They stayed like stones.
Medics can help with the physical pain of wounds. Kyiv's hospitals are ready, expecting many more. But what do you say to someone who needs the comfort of home when everything familiar has gone? This minibus was from the children's home, many with special needs and carers who'd spent 2 weeks in cellars trying to keep them calm. The police took videos to record who'd escaped. Then they check their bags. The fear of Russian infiltrators is strong. Food is not in short supply, along with plenty of questions about what the Russians will do next and allegations about what they're doing now. The police commander said they'd had many phone calls about violations of the rights of civilians and weapons, injuries and murders. Appeals for information about the missing. At another crossing point, hundreds more walking out of the firing line. And a priest who helped rescue them from the Russian army.
There is nothing which is related to God in the actions. So there is no reason for them to attack Ukraine. We are not attack anybody. So we just made decision to have different future. We want to have democracy. So if Russians, they want to restore Soviet Union, may God bless them, but we ask them to do it within their borders.
10 miles east of Kyiv, Russia's tactical blunders continued. Tanks are easy targets when they push forward, bunched up in broad daylight. But the Ukrainians are still outnumbered and outgunned. At strong points around the city, Ukrainian troops are waiting. They know the Russians are regrouping and will try again. Petrol bombs aren't all they've got. NATO has sent in thousands of modern anti-tank weapons for whatever is coming down the road. The Russians are about 5 kilometers in that direction. If they want to come into the city, they're going to have to take this piece of ground and push in. If they're encircling Kyiv, they can probably stay more or less where they are. The men at this position have to assume that an attack is coming. For the soldiers who waited, the sky was bright and the forest still and lonely. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Kyiv.
Well, let's take a look now at some of the day's other developments concerning Ukraine for you. Charities are warning of appalling conditions in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol, which is being besieged by Russian troops. The International Red Cross says many people have run out of food and water in freezing temperatures, with some residents resorting to fighting each other for supplies. Attempts to get people out have repeatedly failed as the bombardment continues. In the highest level of talks so far since the invasion began, Ukraine and Russia have failed to agree on a ceasefire to help people trapped by the fighting escape. Both sides did indicate a willingness to continue talking, but Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made no concessions. The International Atomic Energy Agency says the Ukrainian authorities have confirmed they've lost all communications with the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. On Wednesday, Ukraine said all external power supplies had been cut to the site, which was seized by Russian forces 2 weeks ago. Chernobyl is no longer a working power station, but it still requires constant management. President Putin has claimed that Russia will emerge stronger from international sanctions. In a televised video conference, Mr. Putin said Western governments were deceiving their own people and that Russia would calmly solve its problems. Here's our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg.
I think this is wishful thinking on Vladimir Putin's part because the tsunami of international sanctions hitting Russia threatens to cripple the economy here. Now today, President Putin said, "We will adapt. We will overcome. We will take measures," he said, against those foreign companies pulling out of Russia, raising fears of nationalization, seizing of assets. But is that really the solution to Russia's problem right now? The Russian oligarch Vladimir Putin, one of the richest men in Russia, he wrote today that those kind of measures would put Russia back 100 years, back to 1917 and the time of the Russian Revolution. Now, when Vladimir Putin came to power more than 20 years ago, the one thing he promised Russians was stability. And for years after, he cultivated the image of Mr. Stability, of the only man in the country capable of keeping Russia together. But that stability is gone now. It's been shattered by President Putin's decision to send troops into a sovereign nation, into Ukraine, for what he still calls a special military operation.
You're watching Newsday on the BBC. Still to come on the programme, we'll tell you how the sale of Chelsea Football Club is now on hold after owner Roman Abramovich is sanctioned by the British government.
Oh, how about a spark of inspiration? Oops! Let's get this thing rolling. Ta-da! Try that on for size. Yeah! Level up in Forge of Empires. Play now for free at FOE.tv or download the app.
Our global food system is under profound pressure from climate change, population growth, and fractured supply chains. But might these shocks to our system actually be a catalyst for positive change?
We have to wake up and we have to feed the world. That's a big job.
Can farmers, scientists, and innovators overcome these challenges to protect the future of our food? Join me, James Wong, for Follow the Food on BBC World News.
This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Karishma Vaswani in Singapore. Our headlines for you today. We're with Ukrainian forces on the front line, fighting to defend the country's second largest city, Kharkiv, from Russia's relentless assault. More than 2 million people are said to have fled the capital, Kyiv, but others have arrived after escaping from the Russian soldiers moving ever closer to the city. Well, within Ukraine, humanitarian corridors have been set up in an attempt to allow hundreds of thousands of civilians to escape the fighting. One of those corridors is from Sumy in the northwest to Poltava, almost 200 kilometers away. In the past 3 days, around 60,000 people, that's 1 in 5 of the population there, have left Sumy. Our Eastern European correspondent Sarah Rainsford has been meeting some of them.
Sleeping peacefully at last after 15 days of fear. This little boy arrived from Sumy last night to a city where there are no bombs and no fighter jets. But the children here have brought them memories. Daniel's poem is all about enemies and occupiers and longing for peaceful skies. He and his mum escaped Sumy squeezed into a car with strangers when the shooting was stopped for a few hours.
We walked over broken glass. We saw the ruined buildings, the bombing, the roofs ripped off. It was scary. That's why we're fleeing, running as far as possible from the shooting, trying to save our lives, and the children above all.
It's so Russia doesn't kill us, Daniel pipes up. He's 8 years old. Russia is trying to bomb his city into submission. Tens of thousands of civilians have now been evacuated, but Ukraine's soldiers are still resisting. And behind the lines, there's a giant support effort. The school that's now housing evacuees is also feeding hundreds of soldiers. Teachers and local residents all pitching in.
Now we are cooking for our soldiers so they can protect our homes, our children, our parents, our grandparents, and our whole country.
Oh, just 2 weeks ago, this was a normal school kitchen, but now all of this is being prepared to feed Ukrainian soldiers and people displaced by the fighting. The lady in charge here just told me she can't believe that they're doing this, but it's a massive collective effort to provide the food and to make it here at the school.
This classroom is now home for a family from Kharkiv, safe but stranded, with nowhere else to go. Svetlana talks of the terrifying sound of Russian fighter jets, but also of friends in Russia itself who tell her Ukraine provoked this war and who claim, even now, that no civilians are suffering. That really hurts, Svetlana says. Her niece's world has shrunk to this. It is safe for now, but Katya's learned that can be shattered in an instant. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Poltava.
Meanwhile, the Russian owner of Chelsea Football Club, Roman Abramovich, is among another 7 people who've been hit with UK sanctions because of their suspected close links to President Putin. The decision means that although Chelsea can still play matches, the sale of the club is on hold, and it's now banned from selling tickets, players and any merchandise. The mobile phone company 3 has said it's suspending its sponsorship with the club. Asad Ahmed gave us this update from Chelsea's grounds.
Well, there's a huge amount of interest in what's happening here at Chelsea. Just a week ago, Roman Abramovich, the owner for nearly 20 years, said he was going to sell the club. That caught a number of Chelsea fans by surprise, but they weren't necessarily shocked. It's because of events in Ukraine. In the days that followed, a number of billionaires stepped forward saying they'd be interested in buying the club. But then today, the government slaps on some sanctions on Mr. Roman Abramovich, which means he's not allowed to sell the club as of yet. Other implications of those sanctions means that the club shop has to remain closed at the moment. Now, you may say that's not a big deal, the club shop being closed, but it's the significance of it that Mr. Roman Abramovich is not allowed to benefit from a single pound made in that club shop. So that has to remain closed until further notice. As far as the team is concerned as well, travel costs for away games is being capped at £20,000. Sounds like a lot of money, not when you have to move a squad of players, backroom staff, physios and the managers to away games, including to Lille in France next week. A lot of people will be wondering, will what's happening behind the scenes and with the club itself be affecting the players? We'll certainly find out soon enough.
Asad Ahmed on that story for us. Well, in other stories for you today, away from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I want to tell you about how recovery operations are continuing in eastern Australia after devastating floods left at least 20 people dead and thousands homeless in the past 2 weeks. On Wednesday, the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison declared a national emergency. In the town of Lismore in New South Wales, Mr. Morrison received a hostile reception from some local residents and climate campaigners. Federal and state governments have also faced anger for not acting faster on this matter. Well, Caitlin McMahon lives in Lismore and has been involved in the rescue and recovery operation. She joins us now from there, in fact, and great to get you on the program, Caitlin. I know that you have had family caught up in some of these terrible situations in Australia. Talk us through what they've experienced.
Good morning, Karishma. I awoke to something that you wouldn't expect on a Monday. My dad trying to organise a speedboat to rescue my uncle from his house on the south side of the CBD. It was incredibly confronting because there was a few hours where we didn't know if he'd made it safe. We had no internet or connection with him. His phone battery was low. He had his wife and his pet with him, and the water was rising. So yeah, that was, it's been very, very overwhelming, to be honest.
Caitlin, I'm so sorry to hear that. That must have been so frightening, and what a terrible situation to be in. I do hope your dad is safe right now.
Oh, it was my uncle, I should correct. It was my uncle, yes.
Well, just in terms of how the recovery effort is going, Caitlin, can you talk us through that?
At the moment, it's pretty slow. You have 2,800 homes that have been declared uninhabitable. So you're really, at the moment, we're trying to find emergency housing for people. I work as a pharmacist in the area. So within healthcare, we're trying to get connections back up because we rely on the internet so heavily, and also supply of medicines. So there were a lot of our delivery methods and trucks that weren't able to make it through. So we were very low on essentials in some circumstances, like antibiotics. And yeah, it was quite hard to deal with, hard to manage.
I can only imagine, and you're doing such an incredible job considering the circumstances. But I just want to talk a little bit about how Scott Morrison, as I understand it, did come to your town and didn't receive a great reception, I should say. What was behind that, and what's the thinking about how the government's managed this?
I think there's a bit of frustration, as this is the second major flooding event in Lismore in 5 years. So for people with the current climate climate change policy in Australia is really lacking, and I think that needs to be addressed. And I think that the people that have suffered the same ramifications from 5 years ago are going through that trauma all over again. And we need leadership, and we need to be prepared for this, as it's probably going to be increasing. So I think a lot of people, having lost their livelihoods and their homes and their belongings, were very upset that we weren't ready for this. I think that was a big thing as well.
Caitlin McMahon, thank you so much for joining us on the programme with your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching Newsday. That's all the time that we have for you on the programme today. Do stay with BBC News for the latest global headlines and analysis.